Okay, so now that we've got ourselves set up with a text layer that we want to kind of animate, now we want to actually animate that. So first things first, we'll select that road trip layer, and then what we want to do is make sure our playhead is right at the beginning. So 0 frames, 0 seconds, simply because when we put this animation on, that's where we'd like it to start. Remember, keyframes will be created. Keyframes are given two pieces of information, right? Space and time. Time indicates wherever your playhead is. So that's why we're going to put the playhead at the beginning, because that's where we'd like it to start. If we want it to start later, we would take the playhead and move it further down the line, but that's not what we want for today. Now, there's a cool feature in After Effects, and it works with Adobe Bridge. Now, you can get to Adobe Bridge through different ways, right? Browse in Bridge, that's for if you want to look at files to find out what files you have, get information about it. But we're going to use Bridge under Animations, which browse presets. Now, it's kind of a cool feature if it works. And again, fortunately, it doesn't always work as advertised. Every time they update these versions, it does stupid things, and I'm expecting it to do stupid things again today. So when it opens up, instead of your traditional kind of looking at your desktop, looking up folders, what you'll see are folders that contain basically kind of special effects. So we're going to go down and double click on text, and then it's going to open up a whole bunch, and we're going to go to blurs, and inside that folder it's going to show us some stuff. Now the cool thing is, as you can see, some of them are actually working. So for example, if I click on that, you can see it does a little preview here, so I can see what it looks like. And of course that's great, but of course the one I want to use is blur by word. You can see it's not doing anything. Ideally, if this works properly, I should see a preview of it. And another thing is if I double click on it, it should take that effect and load it onto my layer. And you can see it did. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag my playhead, and there you go. So because I had that layer selected, and because I had it right at 0 seconds, 0 frames, you're going to see that it appears on the screen, which is just exactly what I wanted. So even though it didn't work by showing me in Bridge the options, it did still kind of work out the way I wanted it to. So you can kind of see how that effect works. And again, there's so many different effects in there, and by all means, you can kind of play around with any one of these things, and you can get an idea of how they all work. And again, you can always remove effects as well. So for example, if I go to that road trip layer and I go in there and I can look to see if there's any animations that I applied in there, you can see it's right there. So for example, if I were to expand that, you can see those are basically the effects there. Now, of course, if I would like to, I could actually go in here and remove any effects. I can either just turn them off with an eyeball, and then it absolutely has no effect on there, or if I select that and hit the delete key, it also goes away as well. So, I mean, just because you put an effect on doesn't mean you're stuck with it. You can always find out where it is and remove it. So, again, I'm going to go back to Bridge, and actually I'm going to go with the Evaporate, which unfortunately is another one that doesn't really show me a preview, but instead I'll double click on that one, and now of course when I play the head, there we go. So that's the one that I actually want to use, the Evaporate one. Okay, so that's the effect I want to use. Now one of the problems I'm discovering is as I play that, it's like, yeah, it's cool, but it's really not working the way I wanted it to work. So, but I still want this effect because I like this effect. It's kind of cool. And again, this is where now you can go in here and you can customize things. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on that road trip layer, and I'm going to hit U. And what U does is it shows you any properties that have keyframes attached to them. And basically it's showing me this offset. And this offset basically is the key to making that evaporate effect work. So what these two keyframes are doing is, basically the range of how that effect is going to work. So what I want to do is I want to use this effect, but I want it to do the opposite. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the word offset, and you can see both keyframes lit up in blue. Because what I want to do now is I want to go up to animation, and I want to go to keyframe assistant. And what I want to do is I want to time reverse these keyframes. So basically I'm going to swap the time measurement that's been applied to each one of those keyframes. So what it's going to do is it's going to do the opposite. So now instead of evaporating off, it evaporates on. Okay? So that basically is how you can customize these keyframes. Like, I don't have to use them the way they are. It really, is up to me on how I want to make them work. And there's no end to the amount of customization that you can do to these things, because again, just because that's the way it rolled out, it does not necessarily mean I need it to stay exactly the way it was created. So there's no end to customize. As a matter of fact, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make the effect go longer. I'm going to take my playhead out to 3 seconds, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take that second to last keyframe. Now, because they're both selected, they're going to move, and what I need to do is deselect and then grab the second one, and I'll move it. See, because they were both blue meant they were both selected. So all I'm really doing here is I'm just making it go a little longer. Really, that's it, because this is the distance between these two keyframes is how much time that effect is going to take. So you get an idea of just how how cool this kind of getting into the nitty gritty of all these features can be, where you can really get creative. So what I'm going to do is close up those properties because I don't want to mess with them. Go back to my project panel, and of course I've made some changes, so it's probably a good idea to go File, Save As, and update my version number. So, basically now if I hit my spacebar, I can kind of watch what I've done so far. It'll just put it in a loop, which is, kind of cool. But of course, I'm not done yet. I want to still obviously make some more changes to it. So what I want to do now is I want to get into the manual kind of keyframing capabilities that I have available to me. So I'm going to take my playhead out to 3 seconds, which is basically when that first initial effect ends. So it's not going to, basically there's nothing happening after this. And I'm going to go to that road trip layer and I'm going to hit S. Now remember, these are all the properties that if I just click here and I see them all, those are the basically the DNA of every layer, if you will. But because I only really want to see the scale, shortcut, if I hit S, I'm only going to see the scale. That way I don't have to look at all the other properties. So what we're going to do now is we're going to basically create our own kind of custom animation, if you will, just using the basic properties. So what I'm going to do now is you can see that I've got 160.8 is what the scale factor is, depending again on the size of your composition window, and when I've made it to transform to fit the width, that number could be anything depending on how big it had to scale it up. But that's what's not important. What's important is I'm going to use that value now and attach it to a keyframe, because that's going to be basically at this point this new keyframe at 3 seconds. 3 seconds is the time, and that value is basically applied to that keyframe. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my playhead, because I need to make a second keyframe. So the first keyframe is always made by clicking the stopwatch. I don't want to hit the stopwatch again now, because it'll basically delete the first keyframe. So do not do that. Instead, move your playhead further down the line. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change those values. And because they're locked, you can see that little lock, I'm just going to put in 100, and then I'm just going to click away. And what happens is now is it creates this cool kind of effect where it scales. Now, that is a scale effect. Don't confuse that with 3D where it's moving along the z-axis, because it's just an optical illusion. So if I roll it back and play it from the beginning, what you'll kind of see is, ah, cool, right? There's the effect, and you can see how the other one comes in. Pretty cool. That's some of the really cool, again, features of getting into the properties to do some cool stuff. But you know what? I'm not done yet. There's even other cool things that I can do here. Um, by default, animation's very much machine-like, okay? And what I want to do is I want to add some kind of human motion attributes to it, which is going to kind of, really kind of make it look kind of cool. And again, these are the properties that you can play around with. So I'm going to click that first keyframe at 3 seconds. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to my animation on the main menu, and then I'm going to go to my keyframe assistant. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on one of these options here, and I'm going to go with an easy ease out. And when I do that, you're going to see that keyframe change. It's no longer a diamond, it's a little point. Okay, and now I'm going to go to the keyframe at 5 seconds. Actually, I don't even have to. All I got to do is click to select it. And I'm going to do that again. I'm going to go animation, keyframe assistant, and this time I'm going to do an easy ease in. And you see there's a diamond turns into an arrow pointing it the other way. And when I roll this back, if you watch very carefully, you'll see it kind of speeds up as it pulls away, and then it slows down as it hits that other keyframe. I know it's kind of hard to see it, but if you're paying attention, and basically that's how humans work, right? Like it takes our muscles like a few seconds to fire, or maybe not a few seconds, but it takes a little while to get in full motion, right? Whereas a machine would, doesn't have those uh, constraints depending on how it's built. So to make your animation a little more human-esque, these features in Keyframe Assistant can help with that. Okay, that looks kind of cool. File save as, because again, every time I make any changes, any major changes, I do in fact want to, make sure that I'm upgrading my AEP file, because, if I screw something up, I can always go back and fix it, which, ultimately is the things that I like to be able to do. Okay, so other cool things we can do here. Well, there's so many cool things in this program. Let's take our playhead back to 0. And what we're going to do now is we're going to do some really cool features here, where we're going to use this feature called parenting. Parenting basically is a method of getting one layer to basically dictate to the other layers what they're going to do. It's kind of like sharing DNA, if you will. And yeah, so that's what we're going to do here. We're going to play around with that, which is pretty cool. So what we're going to do now is we're going to, see how this kind of works, right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to that compass Swift layer, and we may have to expand some properties here, and it depends on what your settings are. But if you click on this little circle over square button down here, it'll expand some properties, so you can see some other properties. Now the one that I wanted to see is actually there, even unexpanded, which is the parent and link. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go down to that layer that I want to basically kind of set to become the child of a layer. So I'm going to go to that compass Swift, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that to road trip. And now what happens is when I play it, watch what happens to the compass. You see how it basically takes on those properties of that scale. Now, again, you're not going to see those properties, because if I go to Compass Swift and I hit S, you see there's no keyframes there, right? That's called parenting. And what I'm doing is I'm sharing the DNA, the scale changes, and I'm sharing it by making this layer, Compass Swift, I'm making it the child of road trip. And that's why I picked road trip here. So that kind of gives you an idea of, just some of the cool properties and features that you have at your fingertips if you're playing around with this particular program. So it really, really does some cool stuff. Now, of course, what I want to do is I want to basically kind of line up that compass swift with that road trip. And I'm going to basically do that by going to that compass swift and hitting P. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to basically kind of adjust the X and Y factors on this position. So I'm going to basically move it so that it is basically sitting right on that I of road trip. And now, of course, when I've got it there, if I go back and play it, all I did was basically just justify the position of road trip. So now it's kind of sitting where that I is. So there is kind of another cool little feature that you can play around with this program.